Public Q&A presents AskReddit question. Hiring managers, what is the biggest red flag on a resume? Listing every single accomplishment from high school and/or middle school. When you've been out of high school for 10 plus years. Had a guy list every part he got in a musical or play. Sports he played with scores. Clubs he was a part of. Etc. All of these dated from at least elementary school on. The man was 50 plus. The job had nothing to do with any of these items. 150% that resume was written by his mother. Helicopter mom would have been at least 70s. Do they get a cool name upgrade by then? Unique abilities. Capable helicopter parent if my mom ever lets me escape her rotor wash. My senior year of college, one of my classes had a small section about resumes where we had to peer review resumes. The one I got had accomplishments from middle or high school, which was weird because this person had done several internships both for the major they were in and also during summer. There was absolutely no reason they needed to pad their resume, especially that far back. I am going through a similar class right now, actually. What I am finding is that a lot of high academic achivers are viewing their resume more as their personal brag sheet as opposed to a document that is directly addressing qualifications for a particular job. OMG. This truly explains things to me. Thank you. In college I had a summer job working as an office assistant, and for the first few days all I did was pull files and shred old resumes. One guy listed every single thing he could do that could possibly count as a clerical skill. He even mentioned stapling. Emails. Sending emails. Receiving emails. Deleting emails. I could go on. Please do. The web. Using a mouse, mices, using mice. Clicking, double-clicking. The computer screen, of course. The keyboard. The bit that goes on the floor down there. The hard drive. Correct. You seem to know what you're talking about. Subreddit, unexpected crowd. I interview an Indian guy who had surfing the internet and shooting pistols as his hobbies. I wanted to hire him on the spot to be our wild card. My husband built a life-sized Iron Man suit on his resume. He got the interview because they wanted to meet the kind of guy who has an Iron Man suit and the personality to put it on his resume. He also got the job, which is pretty cool. Edit. Web address. Picture of him in the suit, with me dressed as Pepper, if anyone wants to see. Did he actually build the suit though? Got to live up to those expectations. Edit. Typos. He built it back in uni. Still wears it for the kids at block parties and stuff. It's got cool mechanicals and switches, lights and a little servo that pops the helmet face open and shut. It's pretty nifty. Web address. If you'd like to see. Dude, that is badass. I am putting that I have seen this picture on my next resume. Wow, that's actually really good. I was expecting just cardboard boxes. It works. My partner got hired and got a bunch of interviews because he put adequate guitar and bass player. The interviewers all touched upon that skill he put down. My current job interviewed me even though I had zero experience in that industry, because in my cover letter I said that I am the type of person that will decorate my cubicle for Halloween. I got a job because I put WoW on my CV, mainly that I was in a very good guild and a class leader. Turns out the entire office played WoW, and I would boost them on the game once a week so their weekly reward was higher. So take that, mum, video games did amount to something. I was about to comment on that. I have never played WoW, but I remember a time when it was so popular that internet articles about how to build your resume mentioned that if you're a guild leader you should definitely put it on your resume. Wow, was that popular? I am the type of person that will decorate my cubicle for Halloween. I love it when the company culture tries to be cool, and the HR managers really drink the Kool-Aid. I mean, think about it, musical instruments can be rather difficult to learn, so he's dedicated, but explicitly saying he's adequate also shows he's humble, and not likely to cause trouble because he's being outshined or whatever. I totally see the logic there. Seriously, though. I work in HR and I always tell people to put something interesting at the end: hobbies, accomplishment, anything. When most resumes kind of look the same, it helps you stand out. A watermark of their face on each page of a resume. I know there are templates through Word that let you use photos, but I always found it weird to include a photo of myself on a resume. Some places auto-trash photos. It can expose them to lawsuits for discrimination in the US. It's common and expected in many countries outside the US. Along with marital status, date of bitch, etc. Date of bitch. Can you tell us more about the dates in which you were a bitch? Read this in the voice of Samuel L. Jackson. I can see Samuel L. Jackson argue with the other hiring manager. This has got to be a typo. Just look at the photo he put in his resume. Does he look like a bitch? LOL. Date of bitch. Date of bitch, etc. I tend to refrain adding my dog's birthday on my resume. Ich, just a dumb American checking in. A very unprofessional email is definitely one. You see some insane emails. I knew someone who got an email address that had Big Daddy in it. People keep saying gaps in work history, but honestly guys, make sure you inquire about it before just writing someone off. I had a guy who had a year or two gap in his resume. Most people would just write this dude as well, obviously there's something wrong with him. Well, there was. The dude was diagnosed with brain cancer and had to go through intensive treatment. He lived but came out the other end jobless. Couldn't find work afterwards because of the gap. I could tell he was a smart dude who just had a bad hand of cards. He was hired and he's honestly worked out great and still works at that company. Reminds me of the old joke. HR, why do you have a 4-year gap in employment? Applicant. That's when I went to Yale. HR, oh, okay, you're hired. Applicant. Woohoo, I got a job. Had a coworker from Central America excitedly share with me that her son was going to jail. I was a bit confused until she added that he was also accepted to Harvard. Get good grades, straight to Yale. Get bad grades but parents give a donation, believe it or not, also Yale. It's a Dilbert comic. This. I used to hire truck drivers for a major company, and they were insanely strict about work history. They wanted to know the past 10 years worth, and you couldn't have more than 3 years edit. Of unemployment. Unaccounted was poor wording, unaccounted for. I had to turn down stay-at-home parents, people who were sick, hell even a guy who had won the lottery, and just took a couple years off. I always felt like such a dick turning them down, but I didn't have a choice. Even if I approved it, it would get shot down later on. Edit. Thanks for the award. What is the logic about turning people down with gaps in their work history? The logic, however flawed, is that someone with gaps probably lost a job and couldn't get hired for some reason. Those companies that didn't hire the candidate probably saw a red flag that led to that person not being hired. In reality, gaps happen for any number of reasons, good, bad, and neutral, and it's lazy to immediately assume gaps mean red flags. With that said, if you have gaps in your resume, be prepared to answer why. I completely understood asking about. about large gaps. I just hated that no matter what the answer, we still had to turn them down if it was more than 3 years in a 10-year period. I would beg and plead with supervisors to make exceptions, and they refused. These kinds of policies are why people lie on their resume. That explains a lot. I have some gaps in my resume, and I have applied for many jobs and haven't gotten a single response. I assume mostly it is because I am 55. In the tech field, that is the death kiss. In reality, my last job I made almost $400,000 a year. When my contract was up, I just took a few years off to travel, study, raise my kids. I cannot understand why potential employers would see that as a red flag. Because you're not supposed to live life when you're a slave. It insults the owning class when the slaves see a glimpse of the fruits of their labor before they are too old to enjoy them. Or s. Exactly. You stopped making money for a corporation like us to raise a child, care for a parent, travel, recharge, do anything besides getting more education on your own dime or time to serve us even better. Nope. We need 100% commitment to the lifestyle of slavery. I honestly never understood it, and that company sucked at explaining things. I just knew it was one of the many requirements they had, and I would be punished if I didn't follow it. It sucked. It was once explained to me that even a small gap between jobs or studying ultimately boils down to the fact that cis can't commit to something. Even brain cancer. WTF. Outdated hiring policies based on old ideas about what a good worker looks like. These ideas get ping-ponged around in the echo chamber of corporate policy and become gospel without any real substance or foundation. And then any hiring manager has heard gaps equals bad and just go on repeating it. See, this kind of shit is why I always slightly mistrust workplace experts on what makes a good worker and stuff. You know, hiring managers and others. I realize they still know their job way better than I do, but there's a lot of rules of thumb and unquestioned assumptions in the mix too. And the worst part of it is, it punishes people who do something valuable with their lives other than paid work, like caring for a sick relative. Thank you for this. My husband passed away in 2013, when our son was just 11. I took the next few years off from work to grieve, try to pull myself together and raise the boy. We squeaked by on survivor benefits. When I started interviewing again, I was stunned at how difficult it was to get hired despite decades of successful secretarial experience and en masse. That gap time really created a ton of unfair bias against me. I would be tempted to fill that gap in my resume as sabbatical or civil work, etc. Why should we need to list an actual job as long as we can account for the time? If they want to know more, they can ask during the interview. Self-employment is perfect to put in those slots. If they ask, you could literally make up any bullshit to make yourself sound good. If someone won't consider hiring another person because they haven't spent every second of their adult life working for a corporation, then that someone is part of the reason why society is going to shit. Lack of empathy will see us all suffer in the long run. Yeah, I don't know why I shouldn't be able to take time off if I have the means. It's insane that spending time doing things that you want to do is an unacceptable reason for a resume gap. You're not put here to enjoy life, you're here for the betterment of the company. Or s. I feel really bad for those of you working in places where this is seen as normal. Honestly, gaps in work history shouldn't be counted against the person. It often takes a long time to find a job even if you apply to every possible company. And a small gap can easily become a large gap as one company after another starts passing up on you. Also, so many people take time off for caregiving, women are disproportionately penalized because of this. Yes, exactly. Caregiving, health problems, hell, if someone has money saved up and wants to not work for a bit, why is that looked down upon? There's so much I disagree with in the hiring world. I bypassed my gap by putting homemaker like I would have a job. I didn't list skills. Just that I chose to stay home to raise my child. I also may have dodged a lot of places where me putting my family before career would have become an issue. The gaps in work history is the stigma of hiring that bothers me the most. I am lucky enough to not have to work to raise a family, and it's past time raising a family, as a man or woman, instead of working for those who are able to is normalized. How does this comment not have more upvotes? As someone who has a rather big gap in their resume because they had to take care of mental health issues, it's beyond frustrating to get better only to come back and realize no one wants them anyway. I used to do the hiring triage for a university library. Gearing up for the fall semester, I would have to read through 500 plus applications. My record was in the 750s for a usual 30 hires. Used to get some terrible ones. The most common were L33T or text SPK. All lowercase. All caps. 3-word answers to multi-part questions. No federal work-study award, not an indication of a bad applicant, but we were clear up front that we couldn't hire anyone without it. Simply couldn't afford it, since a student with WS cost us about 1 or 3 what an hourly student would. Terrible availability, also not an indication of a bad applicant, but if you say you're only available for 2 hours Tuesday, Thursday, and every other Wednesday, don't expect a call. Ignoring the questions about putting things in alphabetical or numerical order, doing them but obviously not reading the directions ascending vs descending order, or to a lesser extent getting them wrong. Normally, calling to check up on your application was an immediate bump up to be forwarded on for further consideration assuming availability, and WS checked out, but if you had your parents call. Came in one day, I worked for PM 2:30 am to a blinking light on my phone, indicating voicemail. Checked it. Several messages. First message 8:30 ish, and was from an angry woman demanding I call back by 12 to explain why we hadn't hired her son. Second message 10:30 ishm, same woman, snarling that I hadn't called, and that she would have my job because her son had work study, therefore we legally must hire him lol, no because he wants to work in the library. Third message 11 ishm from my supervisor, wondering if I could find the son's application, as she'd gotten an angry voicemail from the mother, and when she looked in my files, she hadn't seen it anywhere. Other, normal messages followed. Well, since this woman demanded I call before 12, I was all gung-ho to call her at 11:45 p.m. to explain my work schedule to her, and that I couldn't legally discuss her son's application anyway. But I figured I should talk to my supervisor, and at least warn her of this plan. Turns out, when the woman called again, around 2 p.m., she got forwarded to my supervisor, who had remembered the internal online database of applicants I would created for her, and the other hiring supervisors to check when I was out. Using that, she discovered that the kid's file wasn't in my desk, because I would initially rated him fairly well, worth another look. Armed with that info and notes on his file, she told Mommy Dearest what was going on. Damn, I wish I could have seen that woman's face when she was told we didn't hire her son because he never called us back when we contacted him for an interview. It's really amazing that parents don't realize that universities can't share their adult children's information with them. It's literally the law. They have the idea that I am paying for it, therefore it is my right to know. Lady, your son is 22, not 12. It's terrifying how many people think that once they have a kid, they own them forever. And not in an I will always care for my baby way, in an I own their mind, body and soul, they are an object I possess, they will do as I say, and you will not bar my access to them way. Sounds like the mom wanted the job more than the kid, and there was stuff going on. I once had a guy submit a resume saying that he could not work with women or speak to any woman due to religious reasons. I am all for being tolerant of other people's beliefs, but this was for a customer service job. If you can't interact with women at all, then maybe this wasn't the kind of job he should have been applying for. I am curious what religion he follows. Sounds like Hasidic Jew, maybe some other branch of ultra-Orthodox or fundamentalist something, but that's the only one that comes to mind. Maybe the really, really strict Hasidics. I live in an almost exclusively Hasidic, or ultra-Orthodox Jewish area, and most of them will talk to women no touching though, which makes some drive-thrus really awkward. I have only had one encounter where I turned to a guy to tell him that he dropped his wallet, and he started running away from me at top speed, without his wallet. Joke's on him, now you're only 2 punches away from a half-off sub. Heh. Reminds me of when I was on a bus in Israel wearing a sleeveless top. I was 16, and my shoulders or arms were the only skin showing, and this guy was shielding his face from me, and then when the bus stopped he changed seats to sit in the back. Awkward, but he was at least doing the right thing, removing himself instead of demanding you cover up. There was actually a woman on that bus who yelled at me to cover up, but I don't speak Hebrew, so I wouldn't have known if my grandmother wasn't with me. She yelled back at her in Hebrew, "If you don't like it, don't look." The Church of No WAP. I used to be a receptionist. This guy must have come in for an interview while I was on lunch break, and my male colleague filled in for me. I got back in time to see his 2 would-be bosses approach him for the interview, one a woman, the other a man. He refused to shake the lady boss hand, and would only speak to her through the guy. It was also a customer or client-facing position. He did not get the job. Yeah, that's going to be pretty hard with any job. What if he has a female coworker? He's just going to refuse to work with her. It's even funnier that he was applying for a customer service job, though. A friend of mine was part of a group of managers doing hiring, and they interviewed a guy like this. If she asked him a question, he would answer to the men in the group, and not look at her, and he refused to shake her hand. Was apparently very awkward, and he obviously didn't get the job since he would have offended half the employees and clients. I worked for a Landry's amusement park, and we had young people from all over the world working on J1 visa. For the most part, it was Filipinos who are lovely. But then we started getting young men from Turkey who would literally ignore their female shift managers. Literally turn their head and ignore them. Instead of firing them and letting them find a shit job to pay their rent and not get deported, upper management moves them to maintenance to follow around the janitor who needs 0 helpers. This wasn't a religious belief about separating the genders. This is a belief that women are lower than men and have no business giving them directions or even being acknowledged. Fuck you, Tillman Fertitta. I was a manager at a trampoline park when I was 16 or 17 and did all the interviews since the majority of the applicants went to the same high school as me. There was a guy that was in his late 30s who had hardly any job experience and a bachelor's degree. It was literature related. His age was kind of weird since most the staff were in high school or college, but having a degree completely caught me off guard. Asked him why he wanted to work minimum wage when he had a degree. He explained that he was going to be a teacher, but they wouldn't hire him because of his criminal history. He proceeded to tell me he had sexually assaulted a child. He was applying for a job at a kid's trampoline park, looked on the cameras before he left since he gave me a really bad feeling, and saw him taking pictures of kids. He left before I could confront him, so I gave his resume and a hard drive with the entire recording of his visit to the local police department. At least he was honest. You avoided a whole lot of issues there. Holy shit, that's exceptionally disturbing. Glad you avoided that mess. I manage a trampoline park too. Not a hiring story, but I remember around 2016, when I was just a shift lead, I saw this shifty old guy in a bright blue tracksuit, ball cap, and sunglasses come in alone and beeline past the front desk. Might as well have been wearing a literal red flag costume. I immediately start walking behind and followed him up to the main court where a few kids were playing. His behavior was almost cartoonish. He looked left, then right, then pulled a small point and shoot digital camera out of his pocket. I stepped in front of him, and the conversation went like this, me wearing a shit-eating customer service grin the entire time. Me. Good morning. Hi. Can I help you? Creep. No, I am just here with my son. Me. That's so awesome. Who's your son? Creep. That one there. Me. Wow, that's cool. What is his name? Creep. Speaking slowly, Daniel. Me. You sure? Because when I checked him in with his actual father, his name was something else. Want to try again? Long pause. Creep. I am very sorry. Turns on his heel and leaves. Good for you for engaging with him to be sure he wasn't a creep. And the fact that he was just shows how important it is to have good guys like you who do that. I once got a resume that listed under his awards section champion and master of the chug and tug at some dumb SASU fraternity whose name I can't remember. I am still not 100% certain what the fuck that is, but I know I didn't want it. Chug a beer and give a hand job. You shouldn't be giving out frat boy secrets just like that. What are you doing, frat bro? Frat bro, help. I am stuck in this keg. Brahab. From the name, it sounds like drunken tug of war. Okay, that sounds way better than what I was thinking, TBH. I have seen someone put their certificate of baptism under certificates and awards. Edit. Wow, I didn't expect this comment to garner this sort of response. Maybe I should add that the job had absolutely nothing to do with religion, which is why the baptism cert seems so out of place. Even better if it's a birth certificate. Yes, I was born, when can I start working? I dunno, not sure I want someone who was born at my company. People who are alive need breaks, benefits, wages, all that. The costs are astronomical. I just harvest some unformed soul energy out of the void and put that to work. Technically overharvesting that could lead to there not being enough raw soul material for new babies to be born, and thus the extinction of humanity, but whatever. Babies aren't profitable anyway. My wife's late grandmother, who was a devout Christian, was once distressed to learn that I am not baptized. She asked me, what do you tell employers when they ask for your baptism certificate? It was the first time in my life I'd ever heard of a baptism certificate being considered when applying for a job, and my wife had to explain to her that it's pretty much illegal to ask for one. I am Christian, and this is the first time in my life that I heard you get a certificate for being baptized. There was a time, and in certain rural parts of the world, that time is still now, when churches were the only reliable source of records on who existed where. In the US, you can even use entry in a family Bible as supporting evidence for citizenship if you have no other birth records. Keeping a family tree in the Bible used to be common practice. Academic research into genealogies and migrations, especially in Europe, often rely on church records because they're so complete. An uncle of mine went to Poland and was able to trace some of his ancestors back 300 years almost entirely with information he got from churches' baptismal records, marriage records, gravestones, etc. Part of this is practical, and part of it is historical. For Catholics and other churches that are big on formal rites, good record keeping is still useful to make sure that people are going through the sacraments and whatnot in the intended order, and at the intended ages or life stages. For instance, you can't be married in a Catholic church unless they have evidence that you were confirmed. In ye old times, when the church was the center of life, There were of course a lot more reasons to have one book on the center of town, where you could keep an eye on everyone for one thing, so that you could be certain you weren't accidentally marrying your cousin. And in a world where most children didn't live very long, they would be baptized almost immediately to make sure it got done. Unbaptized babies being believed to go to purgatory, so it serves as a pretty good record of birth date. Obviously, nobody would ask you for this in a job interview apart from a few positions actually working for the church, because it would be incredibly illegal, but it shouldn't be surprising that churches write down everything. A baptism certificate is a record of a life event, just like birth or marriage or death. Oh, I like this one, especially if they were baptized as an infant. I had to convince my brother-in-law not to list his political party affiliation on his resume. I had to give him multiple arguments. Why on earth did they want to do that? I could see the logic if they volunteered on a campaign, or worked as a counselor, as they're activities that bring a lot of experience too, but even then you wouldn't necessarily put the party down. Which party, out of curiosity? The pizza party, the only one that matters. Not an employer, but failed miserably to get a high school job. I thought I was doing everything right. I mentioned previous volunteer experience, work ethic, and always came dressed in a button-up shirt, slacks, and a tie for interviews, or even asking about a job. After a year of getting turned down by Taco Bell, KFC, and really any good high school job, I found the issue. Under the previous criminal charges section, I put assault and battery. 17-year-old me had a loose grasp on the legal system, and didn't realize that getting arrested for a fight is not the same as being charged with a felony. I had been arrested on an assault misdemeanor, but never charged. Unfortunately, that revelation didn't come until I applied for military service, and was told my felony charge was a permanent disqualification. You had bad guidance from family or mentors, too. I hope you're doing all right now. Seriously. How did your parents not realize what was going on? They just accepted the fact you got turned down at fast food places and didn't question it. I got turned down from several. It's not as uncommon as you'd expect. I figured my internships with recording studios made me seem overqualified. As a former fast food manager, you'd be correct. It's unfortunate, but we tend to overlook people who are too qualified. More often than not, it's a buffer job until they find something better. So that's wasted paperwork and time spent on training. This is a certified brew moment. Why the fuck would you even disclose that in a resume? If this phrase is written anywhere, my chickens have come home to roost. What if they're applying for a position on a chicken farm? Then they're hired on the spot. No questions asked. I am honestly having trouble fathoming in what context this could even be appropriate on a resume. Since nobody gave you an answer, it could mean two things. All of their children turned up at home, and they need a job to pay for increased cost of living, thanks kids. All of their ex or current girlfriends have turned up in the area, or at home, and they are juggling some awkward social situations. The guy who applied for a design job and attached a photoshopped image of him as a centaur comes to mind. Also typos. I was hiring a very senior level person who seemed like they could do an amazing job, but there were several typos on her resume. I asked the recruiter to let her know. Honestly, photoshopped image as a centaur gets the job IMO. If it's a job that requires Photoshop and it's well done, better have a portfolio of centaurs. Why just centaurs? Photoshop yourself as a wide variety of mythical creatures. If it's a good Photoshop, I think that's a super cool application. Depends on the job, of course. Graphic designer at a bank, for example, might not be the right position for someone like that. If the rest of the portfolio showed competency, and he didn't get hired because the manager saw his centaur Photoshop as a red flag, that's probably a red flag that the company culture sucks and he's better off. Military service. U.S. Army wife, Lieutenant Colonel. I see a lot of too many jobs in a short time as a response, and I get that for some people that's a red flag. But I think for many people they get hired by people who don't understand that employees have expectations too. A few of the jobs I have had for less than a year. During the interview, I said I needed to make at least $100 per shift. They hired me. I averaged $25 for the first month, so I quit. After I trained and got my first paycheck, I told the person who hired me it says here that I got paid for 2 shifts, but last week I trained for 3 shifts before I was on my own for 2. So I was here for 5 shifts. You don't get paid for training. The last time I checked the New York Labor Department website, it said that trainings were paid. Maybe there was a change. They never scheduled me again. Applied for a server job. We don't have one of those, but we do have the counter position open. It's basically the same. My boss has scheduled me outside my availability every single fucking week for literally months now. Never used to be a problem before. Thankfully she is chill, and will change my shifts, but it's gotten to the point where instead of saying it's fine this once, which I used to do if it was my own preferences, aka, I told her I couldn't close, because I didn't want to, not because I couldn't, but now I am like fix it. I have half a mind to just start showing up when my availability starts, and being like your problem. It's true what they say. Bad management will make a good employee give their very least. At some point, you should just leave certain places off your resume. There's no rule that says a resume has to be an exhaustive list. It's kind of tricky if that's all you have done for work, or you have like one job, and then a 3-year gap where all the shit jobs were like that probably makes it look just as bad. NGL. If you don't put anything, then it seems as if you don't have any work experience, and that also makes you look bad. Service jobs that you have hopped to should not be seen as a red flag. It's just a sign that retailers and restaurants rarely care about their employees. Thought of another, although it's an interview. Being a dick in an interview. I work in a predominantly male trade. I am a service lead, so I do know my trade. I may be on the younger side, but I have been working in this business for over 10 years. My male boss asked me to start and interview a guy before he got there as he's running late, and the guy was going to be my employee anyways. The guy comes and seems okay at first. Then it goes downhill quickly. Asks me for coffee from Starbucks. Not office coffee. He wanted me to go fetch him Starbucks. Hell no. So that's not bad enough, so starts asking me interview questions, like trick questions. Starts trying to tell me I am so smart, but in that tone. He's being just generally a dick. I am done. I tell him that the interview is over. He says he'll wait for the boss to do my actual interview. He wouldn't leave. Boss eventually comes in and throws him out. We think he had to get interviews for unemployment or something, but actually didn't want to work. Why else would you intentionally tank your prospects so fucking hard? The small company I am working for has a business coach. He seems mostly useless and a waste of money, but the owners seem to like him. We were having a management meeting with him, bouncing ideas off to see what he could teach us. Hiring came up. As a female running a department in a male-dominant field, I mentioned how I don't want to work with someone who clearly doesn't want to work for a woman, or does any of those subtle things that are hard to out into words, but you just know he's going to be a problem. This coach actually told me I was hiring wrong, because even if he's an asshole, it's on me to figure out how to work with him. Shouldn't I be the one to teach him respect? My team could be missing out on a valuable employee by not giving him a chance. It's an opportunity for me to grow as a manager. I was gobsmacked. Why on earth would I want to hire someone who is going to poison the well? It's not my job to teach someone to respect women, I am not their mother. Our season is stressful enough, I don't need the added stressor of someone undermining me every day. That was the last time I spoke to the business coach. That's just atrociously bad advice. The other managers couldn't believe it either. I have worked hard to build my crew with people I trust and enjoy working with. We have a mutual respect. Every woman we have hired was excited to work for me because they trusted I wouldn't put up with any sexist bullshit. I am not about to risk all that I have built for the off chance I'll teach some douche about my value. I'll just find someone else. Edit. Thank you to those who respectfully discussed that I have my own biases to look out for. I am working on examining that part of me in all aspects, and it's something I should be aware of on the future. A few things. I should have been more clear about the subtle things. It was things like not making eye contact, directing answers to my questions to the men at the table, and the feeling of surprise and annoyance when they realized I was the manager, and not just the office person who set up the interview. My crew is currently 99% men. I am not passing over every man who applies because of my bias. I am hiring most of them, just not the ones I think will be a problem. Last year there were 2 guys, very similar types. I had some qualms about them, but they both assured me they wanted the job, and working for a woman wouldn't be an issue. One of them turned into one of my best leads and a good friend. The other was toxic as hell, would frequently be late or no call, and ignored the way I asked for things to be done. I took a risk, and one paid off and the other didn't. My company is so small, and the outdoor season is so short, I can't really afford to take too many of those risks. Doesn't stop me from hiring anyone, but changes things up when someone says they speak another language. If it's Spanish, you'll be interviewed in Spanish. Sometimes that goes very poorly for the applicant. I actually had that happen to me at a job interview for a tutoring company. Luckily, I actually do speak Spanish. It's certainly not as fluent as my English, but I can communicate well enough. The interview went fine, but it was definitely a surprise. ID expected a few questions about my experience with the language, but I hadn't expected the interview to actually be in Spanish. ID imagined this would be a pretty good way to find out who is blatantly lying on their resume, but I would have appreciated a bit of advance notice. Haha. I felt pretty unsure about the interview after it was over, but I did end up getting the job. Thumbs up sign. Same mine was Spanish and basic Korean. Sat on front of a panel. Phone fell. Sat in front of a panel of 4 and rocked the interview. The Spanish speakers tried the curveball and switched the conversation to Spanish. Responded fluently and repeated it in English for the non-speakers. Told them I can hold a conversation in Korean, and the lady went full speed into Korean, and I was like, okay, slow down, come again. Oh, you meant this? I understand more than what I can speak, I told her. Since it took me a bit to deconstruct Korean to English, process it, then turn English to Korean, plus the stress of looking silly not finding the proper word to complete the sentence. Informal Korean, no more informal. Friend to fried Korean, but you can't talk to an elder that way, it's disrespectful. I learned 6 languages in school in addition to my native English. I can't speak a lick of any of them, just not a language person. I was pushed to include these languages on my resume anyways. Put it on there, went into an interview, and of all the languages they wanted me to speak in, they asked about Latin. I was too terrified to pick up on this. Was a joke to Iron Man 2 when he hires Black Widow, and started fumbling through phrases before the guy stopped me. This is exactly why I leave Spanish off my resume. I can read and write and even listen to it just fine still, but my speaking is really limited since I graduated. Written like a 4th grader. And using all caps. Or capitalizing every single word. Or not capitalizing any words and pretending that punctuation doesn't exist, so the entire thing reads like one massive run-on sentence, and you have to guess where punctuation is supposed to go. Even worse when the entire thing is one massive run-on sentence, and there are just solid blocks of text mainly consisting of lists of irrelevant achievements they got in school 20 years ago. We had an application where the applicant had a felony on their record. They spent half a page in the middle of their resume explaining how the felony wasn't their fault, and that we should hire them. Their felony was from stealing from another department from the last time they worked at the company they were applying to. It's a big company, so I'd think they were hoping we wouldn't care since we were in a different department. I don't know how they made it through the HR pre-screen, and how they weren't on the do not hire list. At least they were honest. That's a hireable trait, right? Right? Does anyone have any advice for the people who have never had a job? Sure. CV. If you're young, you don't really have to defend not having a job before. Everyone has a first job. Related hobby experience and skills are nice. Really depends on the job you're applying. Pizza place. McDonald's. They don't care about skills, they just want warm bodies. Ad designer. Programmer. They care for basically nothing except your skills. Will probably require a portfolio. One-page resume tops. Google example resume or CV, and keep looking at them until you figure out what they're there for. List major accomplishments and positions of trust. Eagle Scout, student councils, head of a club, leadership positions in hobby groups or nonprofit organizations. Referee or organizer for chess club tournaments. Recruiters love that. If you don't have any of those, start thinking about how to get some of those. A lot of colleges will screen you for extracurriculars. Depending on what entry-level job you want, you can pick up a lot of relevant skills. If you've done unofficial work for someone, ask them for a reference. Just list this person's qualifications and phone number or email. Send a cover letter as well. Concise, half a page. First chapter introduce yourself, second chapter show that you've done research on the company or position, and why you'd be a good fit. Third chapter close. Make it look nice and presentable. Google helps a lot with this. Send everything in PDF or printed, no other formats. But have your cover letter also as text in case they want you to send it just via email. Interview. Be presentable. Collared shirt, long skirt or trousers, no flashy colors. Shower. Deodorant. Be on time. Aim to be there 5 to 10 minutes beforehand. Don't schedule it so you have to run and be sweaty and panting when you start the interview. Be prepared to talk about things that are on your CV. Have your CV printed with you for reference. Good luck. Entry-level jobs require 5+ years of experience now because corporations hate people. But how? How do I get experience? By getting a job. But how do you get a job? By having experience. Volunteering and internships, which is bullshit because not a lot of people can afford to work for free. If you can volunteer for just a few hours a week, it will provide some experience, and it makes you seem motivated and nice. If you can find a volunteer role as close as possible to your areas of interest, you may also meet someone who will hire you later. I have that same question. Lies. I am that hiring manager that'll dig into the weird shit. You're interviewing for an enterprise software job, but list Unity 3D on there. Let's dig in. You're interviewing for a React gig, but for some reason list Raspberry Pi project to control kegerator. Let's talk about that one. You wrote a Minecraft plugin. Okay. Let's figure that out. I figure the weirder the thing on the resume is, the higher the chance you were passionate about it. If you aren't, then you're probably not being truthful about much else. This isn't the end all be all, of course. Not everyone even has weird, totally unrelated to the job stuff on their resume. But if you do, remember, it's fair game. Man, I wouldn't have the self-confidence to lie on a resume. I don't even feel like I deserve credit for some of the stuff I actually did. I wasn't an actual manager my old firearms retail job, but being that I was the senior sales associate, my manager included my input in the hiring process, which entailed a lot of resume reviews. We had a guy in his late teens or early 20s drop off a resume for an open gunsmith position. He had no technical training, no gunsmith training, and had never even owned a gun before. He had recently joined the National Guard, and his only experience with firearms was basic orientation and cleaning of the M16 in basic training. His resume basically said just this. In one run-on sentence, his resume explained that he had no idea how to write a resume and had no training in gunsmithing, but that he needed a job, was interested in guns, so please disregard all this and give him a job because he was serving his country. Reason for leaving. Too much drama. I was fired because I didn't agree with the manager. She made rape jokes about a coworker, and it was a small franchise, so the owner only had one manager. You could say management created an unsafe work environment and used that as a point to make a claim that you won't tolerate that in the workplace. This has gotten me a job before. I didn't get a job at a Subway when I said I left my previous restaurant job because the manager yelled at employees until they cried every day, and had to hire completely new cooks 3 times in the 4 weeks I worked there due to walkouts. The Subway manager told me that me not putting up with an extremely abusive manager was a red flag. No, the fact that you said that it's a red flag that you're a terrible boss. More than 2 pages. Job experiences of a month or less. Putting they work at GitHub when in smaller font they just have a couple shitty repos hosted there. Disguising Coursera certificates as bachelor degrees. Obnoxious use of adjectives when describing themselves in the third person. Oversharing personal details like their religion. Long lists of buzzwords and libraries programming. Claiming to know technology X, being asked about it, and being very clear they have no idea programming. Demands as in I won't do X or Y. For designers. Recommendation letter from the CEO of a big design agency to the question why are they not hiring you? Oh, he's my dad's friend. Portfolios with plagiarized work. In interviews. Candidate doesn't remove rollerblades during interview. Sits on desk entire interview while I am sitting in a chair. Refuses to sit normally. Is drunk or high on coke or suspiciously hyperactive and transcendental. Goes on a rant about the Amish and their beards. Can't stop talking about Joe Rogan. Uses the word bitch during the interview referring to an old coworker. Asks me if I am Jewish repeatedly. Demands to see the company's code before continuing interview process. Attempts to speak in Hindi after reiterating them, I don't speak Hindi. Pulling a Robert California seriously, it doesn't play as well in real life, trust me. These are just top of mind. I could fill a book with weird interviews I have been part of. So it's cool if I have my rollerblade backpack with me then. How do you feel about Heelys? LOL, what is a Robert California in real life? Either being extremely weird and turning the power dynamic around on the interviewer in a captivating way, or getting the job on the spot, and then going to your boss and convincing them to give up their own job, LMAO. Wow, that's an entertaining list. I was fully expecting to see attempts to use a Jedi mind trick on me. I had sex as an interest. Got me heaps of interviews. I'll have to remember that. So it works. More so if your name is Elaine or Heather, and less if you are Clyde or Bart. What about Bort though? Were you talking to me? I find it funny how everybody knows how bad many companies work, but if there is someone changing jobs there must be a problem with that person. Every time threads like this come up I need to remind myself that it pretty much only applies to office jobs. I know, right? I told the army my only previous employment was working on an asphalt paving crew for 2 months as a summer job, and they took my then 17-year-old ass, ran a background check, slapped a military clearance on that bitch and sent my happy ass to operate fucking tanks. Can't legally smoke or drink though. Hey hiring managers, it's none of your business that I took a year off working, fuck you for judging me. You mean you want to experience life and enjoy yourself instead of slaving away to companies that don't give a fuck about you like the rest of us. Outrageous. Face with rolling eyes. Seriously. It's fucked up that I can't work for 2 years, save 100K, and then travel the world for 2 years, without being at risk of not being able to get a job when I finish. When someone have 5 years experience of a software that was invented 2 years ago. Edit. Grammar. Then why'd you put that as a requirement? This is a thing. Husband works in IT and hiring managers list a requirement for 5 years experience in a program that has not even existed that long. This is just a sly way of finding time travelers. It's probably a loophole to favor H-1B visa job candidates. Oh look, we tried to find a good candidate from the US, but no one met our requirements. Guess we have to hire this person from overseas, who we're going to underpay. It's been going on for a while. See, if you put out an impossible requirement, and no local workers can satisfy it, you need H-1B visas. Or so I have heard. Companies love it, since if you cross them, time to go home. Web address. I have worked with H-1B visa holders, and they were very hardworking and smart. But constantly aware that if the job doesn't go well they have to leave. The managers who hired them were always flat-out bullies. No Americans would work for these managers for long. So they were manufacturing a labor shortage. I also think they like to hire the H-1 employees, just to have someone to be rude to. It's my personal observation. No hard facts, just a lingering feeling. Oh, but we see loads of businesses wanting 10+ years experience on tech that isn't 10 years old. Goes both ways. We're looking for someone with 30 years experience with DVD players. Counting on fingers. That doesn't add up, but more importantly, why? Somewhat related, but I hate sales pitch where companies combine the years of the team with over 20 years of combined Dolby Atmos experience. Like, you can't add everyone's years of experience like that. What I have learned from this thread so far: any gap longer than a month makes you look like an ex-inmate or a druggie in rehab, even if you have a plausible justification. Too much job hopping makes you look like you got fired constantly for fair causes, even if that wasn't the case at all. Not enough job hopping makes you look like an old hat that needs too much time and money to get updated into nowadays requirements, even if you don't need any. Not having your resume in PDF, even if you don't have the software for that format, even if the job is not related to computers in any capacity. Being over 25 without a finished college, over 30 without at least one master, over 35 without 2 or more. Not being currently employed. Apparently being immediately available because you equals need equals a job disqualifies you from getting a job. Yeah, pretty much explains why I never had anything other than unregistered odd jobs, and then a 5-year gap under my belt due to personal problems within the immediate family. Guess I should learn how to live on the street soon enough, huh? I can only hope that this thread is only meant for the USA. You summed it up perfectly. I several gaps over a month on my resume, and an incomplete bachelor's degree. I have been unemployed for 9 months now, partially due to personal issues, and now because I am apparently unemployable. I am going to be on the streets here soon, and there isn't anything I can do about it. Society is harsh. It's no wonder why the suicide rate keeps going up. Wow. You are still with us. Thanks for being such a nice person. As long as you are here, why not like this video and subscribe to our channel? Also, you can press the bell icon, so you won't miss any future uploads.